Another 5 hours to go, assuming Cosmos didn't find any new issues. It was hard to get a read on an AI at the best of times. Outside, the harvester was tethered to what was left of the transport, a mangled carcass that had once been the Scorpius, a commercial hauler plying the lanes between Atropos and the Dust Belt. Now, she was just another gutted wreck, another payday for me if I could get back to civilization. 3 more jumps at least. If I could collect on the promised salvage fee, I might even be able to afford a decent meal, one that didn't come in a foil pouch. Salvage was a young man's game, they said. Not for someone pushing past 50, creaking in the joints like a rusted-out airlock. But I was pushing on regardless. If nothing else, there was nothing for me to go back to. No one waiting on the comm, no welcoming party at the docking bay. I paid for docking privileges in advance, in full. Just a routine salvage. The Scorpius was a barely functioning hulk on its last legs. Not worth much, and a bitch of a job as I'd only managed to extract 1 intact cryopod before the reactor's containment field began to fail. Still, it was something. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the throb of a tension headache building behind my temples. Probably the recycled air, or the stress, or the radiation, or maybe just the cumulative effect of too many years spent chasing scraps in the void. Cosmos, my ship's ever-optimistic AI, chimed in with its usual monotone. Estimated time to completion 5 hours, 17 minutes. Probability of structural integrity breach, 67.8%. I grunted in response. If that radiation goes up a point in the next hour, we're getting the hell out of here. A payout is only worth it if I'm alive. Acknowledged, Kaz. Current radiation levels are within acceptable parameters for continued operation, factoring in your suit's shielding capacity and duration of exposure. Adjusting probability of mission success, 78.4%. Keep me updated, I don't want any surprises, and tell me again why we took this job. Current financial status, critical. Projected salvage value of the Scorpius, 12,000 credits. Probability of solvency upon completion, 92.7%. Right, solvency. That magic word that kept me going, kept me crawling through the guts of dead ships, breathing in stale air and risking my neck for a handful of credits. The alternative was a slow, agonizing death on the fringes. Or worse, going back to the corporate life I'd left behind. And that was a fate worse than any vacuum. The Scorpius was drifting closer to a field of stellar wreckage. Not good. I had to get the hell out of there. As I worked, expertly slicing through a section of the hull, Cosmos alerted me. Detecting a signal. Origin unknown. Designation emergency beacon. It displayed a series of rapidly changing numbers and coordinates on a monitor that probably should have been replaced cycles ago. An emergency beacon. That was always a wild card. It could mean a quick payday, a ship in distress with a grateful crew and a fat reward. Or it could be a trap, a lure set by pirates or something worse. Or most likely it was just another dead ship. Another ghost in the graveyard. Run an analysis, I ordered, engaging the Harvester's port thrusters to correct our course. Age of the signal, point of origin, any identification markers. Analyzing. The signal is degraded. Estimated age 50 cycles, plus or minus 5. Point of origin. Designated sector Phoenix. No identification markers detected. The signal appears to be a standard distress call, repeating on a loop. 50 cycles. That was a long time. Sector Phoenix was way off the beaten path, far beyond the established trade routes. It was considered a dead zone, a place where ships went to die. Any known traffic in that sector? Negative. Sector Phoenix is outside of standard shipping lanes. No records of any authorized vessels in the area within the last 20 cycles. The sector is designated as unexplored and considered high risk due to gravitational anomalies and a higher than average concentration of dark matter. Scans also show an elevated number of rogue asteroids in the sector. So, a ghost signal from a ghost sector. I muttered. It was intriguing, no doubt. A ship that had gone missing 50 years ago, broadcasting a distress call from the middle of nowhere. It could be a major find, a research vessel or a lost colony ship packed with valuable tech. Or it could be a complete waste of time and fuel, if I even made it there alive. What do you think? Is it worth the risk? If we're going to change course, now is the time. Our fuel reserves are getting low. Assessing. Potential salvage value is high based on the age and possible origin of the signal. However, the risks are also significant. Distance to Sector Phoenix, 3.7 light-years. Estimated travel time, 2 cycles, factoring in necessary course corrections and fuel conservation. Probability of encountering unforeseen hazards, 78.2%. Probability of mission success, defined as reaching the source of the signal and returning with salvage, 37.5%. The odds weren't great. Any sane spacer would turn back, finish the job and head for the nearest port. But the thought of a big score, a real payday, was a powerful lure. And there was something else, a nagging feeling in my gut, a sense of morbid curiosity about that ancient signal. Damn it, I said, making the decision. Plot a course for Sector Phoenix. Let's see what this ghost ship is all about. The journey was long and tense. 2 cycles spent mostly in jump stasis, a state of semi-consciousness where the body was preserved while the mind drifted in a sea of memories and half-formed dreams. It was a necessary evil of interstellar travel, a way to cheat time and distance, but it always left me feeling disoriented and on edge. When we finally emerged from jump stasis in the outer reaches of Sector Phoenix, I was immediately struck by the emptiness. It was darker out here. The stars seemed dimmer, more distant. The sensors picked up strange readings, gravitational fluctuations, pockets of unusually dense dark matter, and a faint energy signature that seemed to permeate the entire sector. Not radiation, not anything I'd encountered before. Cosmos, what am I looking at? The data is inconclusive. The energy signature doesn't match any previously recorded phenomenon. It appears to be emanating from multiple sources within the sector. The gravitational anomalies are also irregular, exhibiting unpredictable variations. Caution is advised. It took another day of careful navigation, threading our way through the treacherous currents of distorted space-time, before we finally located the source of the signal. And there she was, a hulking silhouette against the starlight. The North Star. A Daedalus-class research vessel, one of the largest ships ever built by human hands, the flagship of the Transstellar Initiative. She was a legend, a symbol of humanity's ambition to reach for the stars, and now she was just another derelict, a ghost ship lost in the void. But something was off. The North Star wasn't just drifting, her running lights were on, a glow emanating from various points along her massive hull. And the emergency beacon, it wasn't a distress call anymore. It was different. The pattern had changed. The intervals between beeps were erratic, almost purposeful. Are we sure that's an emergency beacon? The signal is consistent with a standard emergency beacon, but with significant deviations in frequency and modulation. The cause of these deviations is unknown. It is possible that the beacon is malfunctioning, or it has been intentionally altered. I brought the harvester in closer, maneuvering alongside the North Star. The research vessel was enormous, dwarfing my own ship. Her hull was scarred and pitted, marked by the passage of time and the harsh environment of interstellar space, but there were no signs of any major structural damage, no breaches, no obvious indication of what had happened to her crew. I scanned for docking ports, airlocks, any sign of entry. Any visible damage to the North Star? I want to know what we're dealing with before we board her. Scanning. No external damage detected. All systems appear to be offline except for the emergency beacon and minimal power to the running lights. Several airlocks are accessible. However, I am detecting unusual energy readings emanating from within the ship. The readings are similar to those detected earlier in the sector, but significantly stronger. I decided on an airlock near the stern, one that seemed to be in relatively good condition. I donned my EVA suit, a bulky, outdated model that had seen better days, and secured a magnetic tether to the harvester. All right, I'm going in. Keep an eye on those energy readings and let me know if anything changes, and keep monitoring that beacon. Acknowledged. Proceed with caution. I will monitor all systems and alert you to any changes. Vital signs, stable. Suit integrity. Nominal. Probability of survival upon entering the North Star. 75.2%. Gee, thanks. I engaged the magnetic boots and pushed off the harvester, drifting across the short distance to the North Star. The airlock doors were sealed, showing no obvious signs of damage or external tampering. No easy way in then. Any suggestions on how to get this ancient relic open? I'd rather not cut through if I don't have to. Scanning the airlock mechanism. It appears to be a standard pneumatic design, common on vessels of this era. The primary control panel is unresponsive, but there is a manual override located behind a service hatch to the left of the door. The hatch is secured with 6 hex bolts, likely corroded. All right, let's see if we can persuade those bolts to cooperate. It took the better part of an hour, a lot of cursing, and 2 stripped bolt heads. But I finally managed to pry the service hatch open. The internal mechanism was a mess of rusted gears and frozen pistons. 50 years in the void will do that to you. Thankfully, I carried a can of industrial-grade lubricant spray in my EVA kit, a salvager's best friend. I liberally coated the moving parts, working the lubricant in with a multi-tool. "Cosmos, give me a status update on those energy readings," I asked, trying to distract myself from the growing ache in my shoulders. The readings remain constant. No change in intensity or frequency. Good to know. After another 10 minutes of careful manipulation, I felt a slight give in the mechanism. A few more strategic tugs, and the airlock's emergency release lever finally engaged. Before I could open the outer door, I knew I had to equalize the pressure, or I'd risk damaging the mechanism, or worse, getting sucked out into the void myself. Any sign of an atmosphere inside the North Star? Sensors are detecting a minimal atmosphere within the airlock. Pressure is approximately 0.3 atmospheres. Composition analysis is limited due to the low pressure, but it appears to be a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, and trace elements. There are also several unidentified organic compounds present in the sample, but their nature is unclear. Minimal is better than nothing, I suppose. Time to play it safe. I located the airlock's emergency pressurization control, a small recessed panel next to the manual release. It was designed for situations just like this, when a ship might lose its primary systems but still retain some residual atmosphere. I activated the system, and the airlock began to slowly pressurize, drawing on the North Star's limited reserves. It took several agonizing minutes, the pressure gauge creeping upwards at a snail's pace. My suit's sensors confirmed the gradual increase in external pressure, automatically adjusting to compensate. I kept a close eye on the integrity readings, making sure my aging suit was holding up. Finally, the pressure equalized. The inner door unlocked and I manually pulled it open, revealing a dark, silent corridor beyond. Even through my helmet's visual filters, I could see a faint haze in the air, some kind of particulate matter suspended in the stagnant atmosphere. Whatever had happened here, it had left its mark. "Cosmos, run a full analysis. I want to know what we're dealing with." Analyzing. The atmosphere is now confirmed to be a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and trace elements, consistent with a breathable environment that has degraded over time. However, the analysis has identified several complex organic compounds that are not present in the standard database. Their structure is highly unusual. Caution is advised. Noted. Let's hope whatever it is, my suit can handle it. I cautiously entered the North Star. My boots magnetically clamped to the deck, providing a reassuring, if somewhat limited, sense of gravity in the low-pressure environment. This place was definitely not right. My suit's sensors weren't picking up any sounds, nothing, not even static, just the rhythmic thump of my own heart, amplified in the confines of my helmet. I was alone, but surrounded by the unknown. "Give me a full systems diagnostic. Where are we on the ship and what's still functioning?" "You are currently in the aft section of the North Star, near the primary engineering airlock. Ship-wide systems are largely offline. Emergency power is active in this section, providing minimal lighting and life support. The main computer core is located 3 decks up near the command center. Accessing it should be our priority." "Right, let's get this over with. Lead the way." I navigated the corridors of the North Star. The technology was outdated, clunky, and inefficient compared to the streamlined designs of modern ships. But there was also a certain grandeur to it, a sense of ambition and purpose that had been lost somewhere along the way. The emergency lights revealed glimpses of the ship's past glory. Spacious crew quarters, now empty and desolate. Laboratories filled with unfamiliar equipment, covered in a fine layer of dust. Observation decks with panoramic viewports, now offering only a view of the starless void. All signs pointed to a crew that had abandoned ship in a hurry. My suit's sensors picked up anomalous energy readings, always strongest when I moved further into the ship's interior. They emanated from somewhere deep within the North Star, a steady, measurable output that resisted conventional analysis. Any luck identifying those compounds? The analysis is ongoing. The compounds are complex, with highly unusual molecular structures. They do not match any known organic substances, terrestrial or extraterrestrial. Preliminary findings suggest they may be artificial in nature, but further analysis is required. I reached the access point for the main computer core, a reinforced bulkhead with a heavy blast door. The door was sealed, of course, and the electronic controls were unresponsive. "Looks like we're doing this the hard way. Again," I muttered, pulling out my plasma cutter. I followed the instructions, carefully slicing through the bulkhead. Sparks flew, illuminating the darkness with brief, brilliant flashes. The cutter's whine was the only sound besides the hiss of escaping gas as I cut through to the minimal atmosphere on the other side of the bulkhead. It was slow, painstaking work, and my arms ached with the effort. Finally, with a groan, the section of the bulkhead I'd cut free fell inward, revealing a dark, cavernous space beyond. The computer core. The core was a massive structure, a towering cylinder of interconnected processors and databanks that stretched several decks high. I secured a safety line to a nearby stanchion and carefully made my way inside. "I'm in. Can you access the system from here?" "Affirmative. I am establishing a connection to the main computer core. Initial scans indicate that the system is largely intact, although many files are corrupted or fragmented. I am attempting to recover the data now. This may take some time." While AI worked, I began to explore the area, keeping a wary eye on my surroundings. The core was filled with rows upon rows of databanks, humming softly with residual power. "Any progress?" I asked, partly to fill the silence, partly to distract myself from the growing unease that was creeping into me. "Affirmative. I have managed to bypass several security protocols and am now accessing the North Star's primary databanks. However, much of the data is corrupted due to age and degradation of the storage medium. I am prioritizing the recovery of files related to the mission log and any personal logs of the crew." "Good. Let me know the second you find anything." A few moments later, the AI announced, "I have located a series of log entries that appear to be relevant. They are labeled under the name Wallace, personal log. Cross-referencing with the ship's manifest confirms this is likely Dr. Harrison Wallace, the Chief Science Officer of the North Star mission. The logs are fragmented, but I am reconstructing them now." A voice, distorted by static and time, filled my helmet. It was a man's voice, deep and resonant, but carrying a trace of something, excitement perhaps, or maybe fear. "Day 12 of the expedition. We've arrived at the anomaly. Initial scans are inconclusive, but the energy readings are registering at levels we haven't observed in any previously documented phenomena. The source appears to be a concentrated point within the anomaly, exhibiting a unique signature. It's a faint emission, but distinct from the background radiation of the sector. We're deploying probes for a closer look. The data we're gathering could redefine our understanding of astrophysics." The log cut out abruptly, replaced by the hiss of static. "Is that it?" "There are more fragments. I am piecing them together. Stand by." "Day 47, the artifact. We brought it aboard. It's affecting the crew. Physically, mentally. I've seen things. Crew members changing. Their bodies warping. Their minds fractured. Keegan still believes he can control the situation. He's wrong. We need to get out of here now before it's too late, but he refuses. He wants to complete the mission. He doesn't understand what's happening. The log ended with a sharp, piercing sound, like a scream cut short. Then silence. The silence of the grave. What was that sound at the end? Analysis indicates a sudden spike in amplitude followed by an abrupt cessation of the audio signal. The sound is consistent with a human vocalization, but the specific nature of the vocalization cannot be determined due to the level of distortion. A scream, I said quietly. It sounded like a scream. The logs told a story of a mission gone horribly wrong, of a crew driven to madness and violence by some unknown force. It seemed whatever they had found had caused the crew to turn on each other. The logs spoke of strange physical transformations, of crew members developing bizarre new abilities, of a growing paranoia and fear that had consumed the entire ship. The final entries were filled with terror and desperation, cryptic warnings about something called the artifact and its power to alter human biology. All evidence pointed to some kind of contagion, but one that went beyond any conventional explanation. It wasn't a disease. It was something more insidious, something that rewrote the fabric of human existence. My suit's sensors spiked, registering a sudden, localized shift in the ambient energy readings, a deviation from the established pattern within the core. I turned my attention toward the alert. The movement was a rapid change in the electromagnetic field, not visually discernible, but definitively registered by my suit's array. Something massive was there, its presence disrupting the local field in a way I'd never encountered. I activated my suit's floodlights, casting a powerful beam into the darkness. The light pierced the shadows, revealing the source of the movement. A figure stood at the periphery of the floodlight's reach. It was humanoid in general form, but its silhouette was profoundly wrong. It was the proportions that were most disturbing. It was as if the figure had been assembled incorrectly. One shoulder was slightly higher than the other, and the torso was disproportionately wide for its height. Its stance was rigid, almost catatonic, with its arms held stiffly at its sides, fists clenched. The skin, where visible, had a greyish, almost translucent quality, and appeared to be covered in a network of raised, vein-like structures that branched across its surface. These structures were not static. They shifted and rearranged themselves beneath the surface of the skin in a slow, disturbing rhythm. The head was the most altered. The features were indistinct in the low light, but the overall shape was misshapen, with an asymmetry that suggested a complete rearrangement of the underlying bone structure. There were no discernible eyes, but rather two dark recessed areas where the eyes should have been. The figure remained motionless for a while. Then, with a disconcerting fluidity, it retreated further into the darkness, its form blending seamlessly with the shadows until it was no longer visible. The encounter had lasted only a few moments, but the image of the figure was seared into my mind. This was no ordinary mutation, no simple biological anomaly. This was a fundamental alteration of the human form that challenged my understanding of biology, physics, and the very nature of reality. It was confirmation of the most disturbing entries in Wallace's logs, a tangible manifestation of the horrors that had unfolded aboard the North Star. The encounter with the transformed figure had shaken me, but fear was a distraction I couldn't afford. I needed to find the artifact because it was the only thing of value left on this cursed ship. It was the key to getting out of here, not just physically, but financially. Besides, I'd come too far to turn back empty-handed. The artifact was my only hope for a payout, my only chance to salvage something from this nightmare. I needed to know what it was worth, and how to handle it safely enough to trade it. Cosmos, any luck pinpointing the artifact's location? I have identified several keywords that appear frequently in the later entries: containment, laboratory, level 3, and observation. Based on the North Star's schematics, I believe the artifact is most likely located in a specialized containment laboratory on level 3 near the primary observation deck. Lead the way, I replied, and keep an eye out for any more of those things. Affirmative. I am monitoring all sensor readings. The probability of encountering further transformed crew members is assessed as extremely high. Navigating the ship was a disorienting experience. Every now and then, I thought I saw movement, a fleeting distortion, but whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. My suit's sensors continued to register those odd energy readings, growing stronger as I approached Level 3. The layout of Level 3 was different from the decks below. It was more open, with wider corridors and larger chambers, designed to accommodate the ship's research activities. I passed by several laboratories, their interiors filled with complex equipment, now covered in a thick layer of dust. In one lab, I saw what looked like a surgical bay, with a large metallic table in the center, surrounded by an array of articulated arms and laser scalpels. In another, I glimpsed rows of containment cells, their transparent doors reinforced with heavy metal bars. The cells were empty now, but I could only imagine what horrors they might have once held. As I moved deeper into Level 3, the energy readings intensified. My suit's internal sensors registered a slight but measurable increase in atmospheric pressure. This was accompanied by a sensation of my suit's fabric tightening against my skin, as if the external pressure was fluctuating rapidly. The onboard chronometer displayed an error message, flashing a series of anomalous time readings before resetting to the standard ship time. The optical sensors momentarily glitched, displaying a series of rapidly changing numerical values on the periphery of my helmet's display, along with a brief, nonsensical string of code, before reverting to normal visual input. Cosmos, are you seeing this? Affirmative. I am detecting fluctuations in the electromagnetic field, consistent with the energy readings. The visual distortions you are experiencing may be a result of these fluctuations interacting with your suit's optical systems, or potentially a direct effect on your nervous system. Great, I muttered, just what I needed. Finally, I reached the designated area, the primary observation deck and the adjacent containment laboratory. The observation deck was a large circular chamber with a panoramic viewport that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding space. But the viewport was now dark, its surface covered in a strange, opaque film. The containment laboratory was located behind a heavy blast door, similar to the one that had guarded the computer core. The door was sealed, but unlike the previous one, this one showed signs of damage. It was dented and warped, as if something had tried to force its way out. This is it. The artifact should be in there. Caution, Kaz, the AI warned. The structural integrity of the door is compromised. There are also elevated energy readings emanating from within the laboratory. The readings are significantly higher than any previously recorded. Yeah, well, we're not leaving without it, I stated, more to convince myself than anything. Besides, we both know that coming all the way here only to leave because things got a bit hairy isn't exactly going to solve our credit problem, is it? I approached the door, examining the damage. Whatever had happened here, it had been violent. I ran my gloved hand over the warped metal, feeling the texture beneath my fingertips. It was smooth in some places, rough in others, and it emitted a faint heat. It was then that I noticed the residue. A thin, viscous substance, almost invisible in the dim light, was smeared across the surface of the door and the surrounding bulkhead. It had an unsettling, oily quality, and its color shifted slightly depending on the angle of the light, like oil on water, though far more subtle. Cosmos, can you analyze that residue? The substance is organic in origin, but its composition does not resemble any known biological material. It is highly complex, with a molecular structure that appears to be in a constant state of flux. Preliminary analysis suggests it may be related to the transformed crew members. So, whatever that thing was, it tried to get in here. Or something tried to get out. I took a step back, considering my options. Forcing the door open was risky, but I didn't see any other way to access the laboratory. I could try to cut through the bulkhead, but that would take too long, and it might compromise the structural integrity of the entire section. What are the odds that the door is still functional? Assessment: low. The damage to the door suggests that the locking mechanism may be jammed or damaged. However, there is a manual override located on the side panel. Engaging the override may be possible, but it carries a significant risk of structural failure. Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, as they say. Time to roll the dice. I located the manual override panel on the side of the blast door, a small recessed compartment protected by a flimsy cover. Prying it open was easy enough, revealing a tangle of wires and hydraulic lines. The override mechanism was a simple lever, designed to release the door's locking pins in case of emergency. "Here goes nothing," I muttered, gripping the lever. "Cosmos, be ready to cut us loose from this death trap if things go south." "Acknowledged. I have rerouted all remaining power to the harvester's docking clamps and the plasma cutter. I can sever the connection within 5 seconds of your command." I took a deep breath and pulled the lever. With a groan of protesting metal, the locking pins retracted and the blast door shook violently. A rush of stale air washed over me as the door slowly creaked open, revealing the darkness within. The containment laboratory was a circular chamber, dominated by a large, transparent cylinder in the center. Inside the cylinder, suspended in a thick, amber-colored fluid, was the artifact. It was a roughly spherical object, about the size of a human head, with a smooth, dark surface. The surface was not uniform in its darkness. It was as if the sphere was absorbing all light. But within that absolute darkness there were constant shifts in hue, a play of colors that moved and rearranged themselves just below the surface, like a complex chemical reaction contained within. It didn't reflect light from the room, but rather seemed to draw it inward, a void contained within a fragile shell, making it difficult to focus on anything else in the room. The rest of the laboratory was in a state of controlled chaos. Equipment lay scattered across the floor, wires snaked across the deck, and broken glass crunched under my boots. It was clear that something terrible had happened here. In one corner of the room, I saw a shape huddled on the floor. It was a spacesuit, similar to my own, but it was torn and mangled, as if it had been ripped apart by some incredible force. Beside it lay a collection of bones, picked clean and arranged in a disturbingly deliberate pattern on the floor. As I approached the cylinder, my suit's sensors went wild, registering a massive spike in the energy readings. The tingling sensation on my skin intensified, and the visual distortions in my helmet became more pronounced. I could feel a pressure building inside my head, a throbbing pain behind my eyes. I reached out towards the cylinder, drawn in by some irresistible force. The surface of the cylinder felt warm to the touch, even through my thick gloves. As I peered closer at the artifact, I noticed something else. Within the swirling colors on its surface, I could see fleeting images like shadows cast on a screen. Faces distorted and unrecognizable, but undeniably human. They appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye, each one contorted in an expression of agony or terror. The silence was shattered by a sound from behind me, a wet, gurgling noise, like air forced through a viscous fluid punctuated by sharp, clicking sounds. It was the same creature I had encountered earlier, standing in the doorway of the laboratory. It was even more horrifying in the full light. The transformation was more advanced, the skin pulled over distended bones, the growths larger and more pronounced. One arm ended in a cluster of bony protrusions, while the other seemed to have retracted into the torso, leaving a gaping cavity in its chest. But amidst the grotesque deformities, some semblance of humanity remained. One eye, though clouded and milky, was still recognizably human, staring out from the ruined face with an expression of what could only be described as profound suffering. A single half-formed tear, viscous and dark, traced a path down its cheek. The creature lurched forward, its movements stiff and awkward, as if its own body was a machine it was struggling to control. Each step was labored, accompanied by a sound like grinding gears. It was as if its body was struggling to obey the commands of its ravaged brain. It moved towards me with an agonizing slowness. I tried to sidestep, to put some distance between us, but my own movements felt sluggish in the low gravity, hampered by my bulky suit and the growing fatigue. It reached me, its movements continuing with the same slow, almost mechanical determination. One of the misshapen arms, the one that ended in a cluster of bony knots, swung towards me. I tried to duck, but the blow caught me on the shoulder, the impact jarring me to the core. My suit's integrity alarm blared, a shrill warning in the confines of my helmet. I stumbled backward, my boots losing their grip on the deck, and fell heavily. My helmet struck the floor with a thud, the sound amplified in the thin atmosphere. For a moment, my vision blurred, the already dim emergency lights swirling into a dizzying vortex. I pushed myself up, my arms trembling with the effort. The creature was still advancing, its movements as slow and inexorable as the tide. The deformed arm swung again, this time striking my leg with enough force to buckle the reinforced plating of my suit. I tried to scramble away, to crawl back from the creature's reach, but my limbs felt heavy. A searing pain shot up my thigh. This was it. I was going to die here on this forsaken ship, another victim of whatever madness had consumed the crew. Transporting the artifact, hell, even touching it, seemed like the height of insanity now. Greed, desperation, call it what you will. It had led me to this precipice. As the creature raised its arm for another strike, my eyes darted around the lab, searching for anything that could offer even a sliver of hope. The creature was positioned almost directly in front of the containment cylinder. A desperate idea, a fool's hope, sparked in my mind. Instead of retreating, I propelled myself forward, rushing toward the creature. It was a risky gamble, one that banked on the creature's clumsy movements and my own desperate need to survive. The misshapen arm swung, but I was already moving, aiming to use its own momentum against it. My shoulder slammed into its torso, the impact jarring me to the bone. The creature stumbled, its balance thrown off by the unexpected maneuver. It crashed heavily into the containment cylinder. The structure gave way, collapsing under the creature's weight. The amber fluid within, the substance that had held the artifact in stasis, splashed outwards, engulfing the lower half of the creature's body. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. The fluid, upon contact with the creature's altered flesh, began to bubble and froth, releasing a cloud of acrid vapor. A sound erupted from the creature, a horrific mix of screeches, howls, and gurgles that echoed through the chamber. It was the sound of something being unmade, atom by atom. Its body convulsed, the swollen growths that covered its skin blistering and bursting. The vein-like structures beneath its skin writhed, as if trying to escape the corrosive touch of the fluid. The creature thrashed, its altered form dissolving and reshaping itself in an agonizing dance. It was melting, its features becoming increasingly indistinct, merging with the surrounding fluid. I didn't stay to watch the creature's gruesome demise. I scrambled back, away from the horrifying spectacle, and fled the laboratory. "Cosmos," I gasped, "get the harvester ready for immediate departure. Full burn." I was a wreck, my body battered, my senses reeling. The pain in my leg was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality, a constant, agonizing anchor in the swirling chaos of my thoughts. Every step was an agony. Adrenaline and the instinct to survive were the only things keeping me going. I navigated my way back to the harvester, the echoes of the creature's death throes chasing me through the silent corridors. "Cosmos! Status!" I croaked, my voice a ragged whisper. Approaching the airlock. Oxygen levels critical, suit integrity compromised in multiple locations, probability of survival low, the AI reported. I stumbled onward, driven by a primal urge to escape, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that cursed ship. But with each step, a new, unsettling sensation began to creep into my awareness. A tingling, not on my skin but beneath it, as if something was rearranging itself within my very cells. A crawling sensation spread through my limbs, accompanied by a deep pain that seemed to grow from my bones. My perception of the corridor warped, the straight lines bending and twisting, the edges bleeding into a spectrum of bizarre hues, reminiscent of the artifact's surface. I had difficulty moving my fingers. My right hand spasmed, and I couldn't unclench it no matter how hard I tried. It was as if the bones in my hand were fusing together. When I tried to walk, I noticed I had no control over my left foot. My suit's internal diagnostics flashed a warning. Foreign biological agent detected. Cellular degradation in progress. The chilling truth gripped me, a wave of icy dread that extinguished the last embers of hope. The creature's touch, the fluid, the artifact's energy, they had infected me. My breath hitched in my throat. I could feel it happening, the slow, insidious transformation beginning within me. I knew what that meant. I had seen the end result, the horrific biological alteration that had once been a member of the North Star crew. No, I wouldn't let that happen. I wouldn't become one of them. My hand shook as I reached for the manual release on my suit's helmet. It would be a release, a slow fading into the darkness. A better fate than the one that awaited me if I let this contagion run its course. My fingers fumbled with the release, my movements clumsy. The tingling in my limbs intensified, and I could feel my body changing, warping. This was the only way out, the only way to ensure that I wouldn't become another monster haunting the corridors of this derelict. I was going to die on this god-forsaken ship, no doubt about that. But I would die on my own terms. A final act of defiance against the horrors of the void. They say greed is the root of all evil. Out here in the black, it's not so simple. It's survival, it's desperation, it's the promise of something better that lures you in, that makes you take the risks, that pushes you to the edge. I was no different. I was just another scavenger, picking at the bones of a dead dream, hoping to strike it rich. And I found something all right, something that will stay with me until the end. They say the void is empty, but they're wrong. It's full of things. Terrible, wonderful, terrifying things. And once they touch you, they never let go. My vision dimmed, the darkness closing in. Time to sleep.